another unidentified object shot out of the skies.
We're getting a classified briefing on the 3 objects the U.S. military shot down in recent days.
For the 3rd day in a row and the 4th time in just 9 days.
3 times in 1 week, U.S. fighter jets have shot objects out of the sky.
The U.S. intelligence community says UFO reports involving the military are on the rise.
And it comes just 1 day after the U.S. took out a different object over a...
U.S. intelligence agencies confirm hundreds of additional UAP sightings have been reported.
And the office that tracks these sightings in restricted military airspace says that some, quote, require further analysis.
The flying objects in these reports are described as appearing, and I quote here, to have demonstrated unusual flight characteristics or performance capabilities.
The White House is still unable to confirm what they were or where they were from.
How worried should Americans be about this?
Well, I think they should be pretty worried.
Hey folks, welcome back to another episode of your favorite podcast, That Would Be Rad. We're a podcast that majors in 80s and 90s nostalgia, comic culture, all things paranormal, and minors in retro video games, tabletop RPGs, pre-internet mysteries, and raising our kids to be half as cool as we were back in the 80s. We're your hosts, Woody Brown
and Tyler Benz.
What's up, bro?
Hey, pal.
Look, man, I don't want to waste a single second because here's the deal, folks. Listeners, welcome.
Welcome.
You know, if you've been paying attention to the news whatsoever or listening to any other podcast that exists, more than likely you've already heard about this. But listen, we couldn't, for historical purposes, we wanted to kind of give you guys some context into why we decided to talk about what we're talking about today. So, as of this date that you're listening to this show, this should have come out Monday, February 20th. The following things have happened. Now, a little disclaimer. There could have been other things that have happened, but so far, at the time that we're recording this, this is what's going on. And I'm just going to list a couple of things, almost like a timeline of events that have happened. And Tyler's going to hold his opinions
chomping at the bit
to the end of it all, or when we start talking about everything. Okay. Number one. Well, let me see. It all started February 4th of this year, 2023. A Chinese spy balloon was shot down over the Atlantic Ocean. It initially, I think, entered Alaskan airspace on January 28th, 2023, and drifted from Idaho to South Carolina, where right off of that South Carolina coast, it was shot down. Reportedly, it was the size of 3 school buses and flying at the altitude of 60 to 65,000 feet. Now, some quick context there. Commercial airlines typically fly anywhere between 33 and 42,000 feet. There are some, like the superfast Concorde, that get higher altitudes, like 51,000 or even 60,000 feet. But typically, the flights that we go on to go, all around the world is generally like much, at least 20,000 feet lower than that. Then, now, again, this one is somewhat unique in that thus far, it's the only one that anyone in terms of another country or organization has claimed ownership of. And so China claimed ownership and states that, I'll get there later. But anyhow, China did admit, I guess, that this was, theirs. Okay, that was February 4th, 2023, when it was shot down. Then, only a few days later, on February 10th, 2023, a, quote, UFO was shot down over Alaska. Reportedly, most likely not a balloon, and it was the size of a small car. If that's not enough, February 11th, 2023, a U.S. F-22, which those things are freaking awesome, downed an object over the Yukon Territory bordering Alaska. A Canadian official described it as cylindrical in shape and smaller than the spy balloon. February 12th, 2023. Near Lake Huron, a UFO was shot down. It first appeared over Montana and then shot down at Lake Huron off of Michigan. It was flying around 20,000 feet, which is, pretty close to where a commercial airline flies. And it was octagonal in structure, or in shape, I guess, with strings hanging off of it, but no discernible payload. And again, I'm reading off of sort of highlighted snippets of, I guess, official reporting or whatever, right? So no discernible payload. I have in quotes in my notes here because someone actually said that. So up until now, those are the main ones that have kind of happened. And really, again, for historical purposes, in case you're listening to this 1 year, 2 year, 5 years, 20 years into the future, you'll at least know, oh, this was that weird week where these things started popping up seemingly out of nowhere.
When our kids are listening to this, Amelia, you just turned 8. Elliot, you are still 4. And it's a crazy time right now.
It's nuts. So before we talk about the official topic, right, I think technically it's going to naturally progress into that topic because I think first it's important for us to kind of just talk about, what we think is happening or what we think these things are. And it's an interesting time, too, for folks that are interested in this stuff because from what I can tell, there's a lot of, I would say like the UFO community isn't necessarily divided, but there is a like sort of a strong line of what people are thinking. But for the most part, I would say the majority are saying these aren't of alien origin, right?
Right.
I know you're chomping at the bit. But, you're just like, just biting the sin out of your lip to tell me what your thoughts are. But do you want to hear what mine are first? And then you can happily destroy my theories?
Yeah, let's do it.
Well, my initial thought is, hey, guys, pack up the car. The world's ending. And that's because I've just been, hey, man, I'm watching The Last of Us. I love, those kind of movies and stuff. But then when all this stuff starts happening, it's like, well, first it's the Chinese one. And it's like, well, are we being invaded somehow? Like, what is it carrying? That's weird. Like, and also my initial thought with that one is, okay, wow, it's at 60,000 feet. The interesting thing, really, the part that I started being like, wait, this is starting to get a little weird, was sort of like the different shapes. So we have like a cylindrical one for people that have been fans of UFOs and these kinds of things. I think, Tyler, you described it to me initially even, or just referred to it as like, like a Tic Tac potential the cylinder, right?
The Tic Tac was the footage from the pilot from like 2019 maybe.
Right. Yeah. But this one is kind of that kind of shape,
the same,
right?
Yeah.
That's just what I pictured in my head anyway.
Which actually, to me, I don't know. Not going to get into like what we think they are, but I love whenever there are...
anyway.
Yeah. There are sightings of those like cylindrical ones, which are really cool to me because those actually predate any of like the disc shapes, and they used to call them the ghost rockets.
Man.
So little history lesson.
Little trivia in case that's a Jeopardy question.
And so I like those. I like the idea that
they are cool. I like them too.
Like
all
cigar shaped.
Yeah, that's it. Cigar shape. Yeah. And then like another one was like an octagon, right? And once the altitude started getting a little bit lower and stuff, that's when it becomes, I don't know. It's long story short for me, I don't think they're extraterrestrial in origin. I think, if anything, it's just some sort of spying going on for sure. And at those weird altitudes where, like, the radar devices aren't necessarily sort of, what is the, what is the word I'm looking for, man? Like
what?
The settings being not conditioned, not primed, not.
I know what you're trying to say.
God, what am I trying to say here, man?
I know
Like,
exactly what you're trying to say.
Not tuned into, but I don't know. The radar wasn't optimized. That's not the word I'm looking for, but that's the word I'm going to use. To
calibrated.
Calibrated. Thank you, man.
Yeah.
This is the section of the episode where we're still like not mad at each other, but no, like I feel like maybe in my mind, again, this is just what I'm thinking. Everyone knows now, if you are a listener of our show, that, you know, my wife is not a skeptic, but she's a very, she definitely believes there's always some sort of like reasonable explanation, that reasonable explanation being more likely to be not of paranormal or strange or whatever, okay? So anyhow, all that to say, I think it's more of a military sort of operation, not our own, but, you know, people trying to spy on us. They've been experimenting with different altitudes and different types of things that can collect information and or drop payloads, you know, and that's the scary thing, you know, for me, the potential that we've just, you know, been missing this for a long time. Anyway, that's what I think. Again, I don't think that they're of alien origin.
Yeah.
And thank you, Tyler, for being so patient. I don't know that you've never interrupted me.
Yeah, this is a first.
This is the first time. I mean, there's another moment in history, folks.
Yep.
Okay, man, go ahead. Let us know. What do you think?
Okay, for our longtime listeners, you...
After these messages, we'll be right back.
On June 14th, your favorite emotions are back on the big screen in Disney and Pixar's Inside Out 2.
It's time to greet your Team Riley. It's anger.
Let me at him.
Fear.
Safety checklist is complete.
Disgust. Ew, ew. Sadness is in the house.
Oh, no.
Hello, I'm anxiety. I'm one of Riley's new emotions.
Disney and Pixar's Inside Out 2.
There's a part 2? We're going!
Rated PG. Parental guidance suggested. Only in theaters June 14th. Get tickets now.
Your brain needs support, and new Ollie Brainy Chews are a delightful way to take care of your cognitive health. Made with scientifically backed ingredients like Thai ginger, L-theanine, and caffeine, Brainy Chews support healthy brain function and help you find your focus, stay chill, or get energized. Be kind to your mind and get these nootropic chews at ollie.com. That's OLLY.com. These statements have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration. This product is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease.
It's a pretty cool place if you're a Martian.
Or a vampire. You think you really know what's happening around here, don't you?
Is anyone out there?
We're fighters for truth, justice, and the American way.
Hey, this is Woody.
And this is Tyler. And you're listening to That Would Be Rad.
And now, back to our show.
So for our longtime listeners, you would probably classify me as maybe the more true believer of the two of us. You know,
Yeah.
I tend to try to always have an open mind, especially when it comes to like the super high strangeness stuff that just seems really far out and really, you know, bizarre. I try to like keep an open mind and keep that, you know, childlike wonder, you know. But I have to say my sort of like truther side when it comes to this stuff, I think every bit of this is bull. I think that, number one, I'm not even sure. Well, let me give my thoughts on what I think the balloon is. I think the balloon was a complete distraction. I think...
So you're saying, and I'm just making sure that I understand so that other people understand, you're saying it is not of Chinese origin, but the Chinese government claimed it is for a bigger plot.
Well, so here's the thing. So, and
get ready, folks.
And this isn't a show that we're not like a political show, right? But there are there are massive ties with the Bidens and the Chinese. I think it just came out yesterday that it is a known fact that they received $31 million from top Chinese, people in the Chinese government. So, just keep that in mind. But I think, and there's also some footage apparently floating out there that there's photos of the balloon where you can see English writing. So,
not the one that I see. Right? I mean, that's not what people are saying. Right?
No, it's not that one. No, not that one. But there's another one. There's some zooming in, and it's coming from the internet, so God only knows. I think you're telling me that the most protected airspace in the world would allow a giant, slow-flying balloon that's as big as, 3 school buses?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
To float completely from end to end of our nation without every F-22 dispatched to take the thing out, I think that's ridiculous. However,
I mean, there's so many different ways to slice that. It's ridiculous in every way. You know what I mean? Like, either there's a couple things going on here. Some other things that I've read is like people think that maybe this is just, again, let's assume that it's not some financial tie thing, but like more of, this is a government that is just experimenting with like, what can we get away with?
Well,
right? And so wait, hold on real quick. And so in other words, they're testing all these different altitudes and it's like, oh wow, at 60,000 feet, this slow moving thing, maybe it looks like a cloud to those radar technicians.
No way.
No,
I think, and I'm not saying that like it's definitively has, anything to do with like the Bidens and sort of some shadiness going on with like the Chinese military. I mean, I'm not saying that I don't believe that, but I am saying, okay, so.
What you're saying is we're not going there.
Yes, we're not really going to do that. So, no, I think that I think there's several possibilities. I think maybe it could be that because of those sort of dealings, maybe there is a portion of this that is like, hey, we know this thing is moving across our nation, but like we're going to let it slide. So I think that's a possibility. But I don't know. I just feel like it's sort of like an Occam's razor thing, which is the belief that, it's whatever the most like easy sort of apparent answer is, it's probably that. And I feel like, and this will eventually get into the real topic of today's show, but I do think that a weather balloon makes its way across our entire nation without being shot down. That's insane to me.
Can I just add something real quick too? To that? No. To your point, man. It is strange that like, and also if it was a quote unquote spy balloon, in the same way of like, I don't think it's extraterrestrial because boy, if aliens that finally get here,
balloons
have like are riding in a little balloon that's just moving so slow.
Although Woody, that would be like the funniest, most hilarious bit of irony in the world because
they finally made it, or that's like their escape hatch or something.
No. Because when Roswell came, it was clearly a UFO that crashed, and then they retracted it and then put out, it was a weather balloon.
Right.
So the idea that the UFO is finally here, and then they just take the form of an actual weather balloon. That's amazing.
That is amazing. And also another equally hilarious thing would be like, they're just like, oh man, we're going to crash, Mayday. And they're like, this was their lifeboat basically. Right. And they're like, it's okay. They won't shoot us down. We're not scary looking.
Boom.
Yeah. Pop goes the weasel.
No, I think you have this weather balloon, and then over the course of 3 days, you have 4 supposed UFOs shot down. I think it's total bull. What I do think is I think that it does have to do with this new
let's call it a spy balloon, dude, because I also want to make a distinction here too, because I wrote this down because I recently watched this there's this YouTube channel, this really cool engineer that like, he's the guy that makes like the glitter bombs, for people that steal packages, and the world's largest super soaker.
There's a big glitter conspiracy. Have you heard about this?
I have heard about the glitter conspiracy. We're not going to get into it here.
It's weird.
But it is strange. Somehow this guy got a hold of it, a lot of it.
Yeah.
But he was talking about, for whatever reason, something that they were doing, and then he went into like weather balloons or whatever. And I didn't know like how many go up like on a daily basis. And the fact that like that is how we have nowadays a more accurate, like by the hour sort of forecast, because it's transmitting the data down. But here's something that is going to be a distinction between a typical weather balloon and then this one. Okay, so remember, this one is reported to be the size of 3 school buses. Now, I looked up what's the average size of a school bus here in the U.S. It's about 35 to 45 feet. So times 3, you're talking about something that's like 130 plus feet wide, right? Well, a weather balloon is like 6 feet wide.
Yeah, right.
They can get up to about 20 feet wide, and they don't go, essentially, they're not 60,000 feet.
Right. And and I think the size is what allows it to get up.
Another thing that's interesting to me, you're telling me too that highly monetarily superior, probably military, physically superior in terms of numbers of soldiers, just due to their population
and technology, military, due to Roswell.
Right. I'm talking about China in this instance.
Oh, right.
They just don't have a spy satellite with some HD.
Yeah,
we got a balloon.
Well, and also I think I think this whole like them, the news, whatever, mainstream media, I think like them constantly making like the big deal of it being like so high, and it's like we do. I mean, it's like widely known that NORAD can clearly see it. It's not like it's not like the old days where it was like,
so that they don't have sensors that are just going nuts. Because I'll just give another example. When I'm flying my drone, well, here's something else that I heard someone say is like, why couldn't we just see it, man? Well, okay, look, when I have my drone and it's only up,
it's too high,
400 feet, I can't see that thing. I can hear it, but I can't see it.
Although there are photos of it, and that's another thing. There are photos where it didn't just keep that altitude the entire time. Like
like the one that I sent you.
No, but like there are photos, from civilians where it was much lower and visible, So
and something that big, you're right.
Clearly,
it's kind of hard to miss,
Yeah. So I think there was either some shadiness. I think maybe it is an actual spy balloon from China. I mean, there is a long history of, we're not throwing you under the bus for our Chinese listeners, but there is a long history of the Chinese using this like balloon technology to basically like drop these like fire bombs. Have you heard about this?
No, well, I mean, I kind of read something about that. That's what I was talking about earlier when I said, that's the kind of thing that scares me more, is just like, if it is a country, like what are they using it for and what are the capabilities? Obviously, this to me, if it's that easily caught, then we're not even close to understanding like the worst case scenario. You know what I mean? And I know that their spy balloon usage, the U.S. has used in other countries too, and all that kind of stuff. But
what I'm talking about goes back to the 50s. Like they were, people would see them like coming through like the Midwest, like just sort of out of nowhere. And technically, I think those are technically our first. They sort of fall into the category of like the first domestic terrorist, sort of attack.
Wow,
which is pretty interesting. But
let's get on to the other ones.
Okay, I just man.
I think the ultimate answer is you just think it's.
I think
like complete.
Yes,
there's some sort of something going on here that isn't.
Yes, I think that when you have within a day of each other, you have like Trudeau coming out, and which for everybody out there that loves Justin Trudeau. Listen, I love Canada. My art rep, Cam, is a proud Canadian, and every Canadian that I've ever met probably has been amazing. But I think their prime minister is absolute garbage. I also believe that he is definitely Fidel Castro's son. That's another conspiracy. If you want, go look into it, and I mean, boy, it's hard to deny. But anyway, I think he's a super shady guy, and I think that him putting so let's just look at this. So, I brought up the Roswell crash, back in 1947. It was clear what it was. it was released in like the radio announced that it's an unidentified craft. It crashed, yada yada yada. Well, we're talking from 1947, and then within a day, it was retracted and then put out to the press that it was just a weather balloon. So from 1947 until 2019, the government has fought with, by tooth and nail to keep this stuff a total secret. Suddenly, in 2019, the Pentagon comes out and reveals, this footage that had been sort of making its rounds on the internet of like the USS Nimitz and the Tic Tac UFO. Yes, we admit that it is real footage. We don't know what it is. We don't know. We do believe that it could have possible extraterrestrial origin. Suddenly, everything online is going from using the terminology UFO to UAP, which is sort of, and suddenly like every government official that is putting out public statements are using the term UAP. And, you have like Elizondo and
it's super weird too, because in all of this crap, they just were like, it's UFO.
Right, exactly.
It's like they completely changed course on what to call them. I don't know, it's weird.
Well, and that's what I'm saying too. I think that it just seems either it's like a massive distractionary tool, or I think that it more than likely does tie into what our topic is today. I think that it's either totally fake, possible, like, I know it's going to sound crazy until we get into it, but especially for you folks that like have never like looked into this stuff, but I think that it's possible like hologram technology, which has been known, the U.S. military has been known to have since 1976. And I think that it's either that or there's a possibility that it could be, our own sort of crafts.
Now, I'm not, well, let me just say this. Typically speaking, I am not necessarily one to more than just like briefly be somewhat entertained by a conspiracy theory. Tyler knows this about me. Listeners, it's probably the reason why, for the most part, we rarely kind of talk about them on the show. And so, like, from my perspective, when Tyler kind of was initially telling me all this kind of stuff, I got to say, like, initially, when you start thinking about it, right? And let me say this too. Could it all just be coincidence? Are there things that potentially are, now don't say no, you almost said it just then.
No, I'm saying, it's a coincidence for UFOs.
No. I'm not even there. I'm not even there yet. I got it. So that's the thing that just let me, hold on, man.
No,
this is what happens when you interrupt?
No.
You were doing real good.
Hey, can I say one thing though?
Well, you're gonna anyway, right?
No. Let me just clarify one thing.
Okay.
Despite whatever Google says, or any sort of like Snopes fact checkers, the term conspiracy theorist was actually created in 1969 when JFK was assassinated. It was used to sort of throw shade towards people who looked into anything that sort of veered from like the public opinion of like everything is rosy and flowers with our government. They're only here to protect us and do positive things. So just know that, like, when we say conspiracy theories, like, I don't think it's a bad thing. I don't look at it as like
we're also not limiting them to only governmental conspiracy theories.
Right. Yeah. I mean, like I just said, like the glitter. There's I think that's a conspiracy theory. I mean, but
there's a lot out there.
I do want to say that the term conspiracy theory and conspiracy theorist was created as like a type of like disinformation sort of attack to like, take away any sort of validity for somebody who's like, hey, I've been studying this footage and it doesn't quite add up.
Yeah.
So
the unfortunate thing is too that just like in every section and corner of any group, there's crazy people.
Oh yeah.
And so they tend to be the loudest, and they tend to be the ones that get heard first. And then in addition to that, it makes it easier for people to just be like, well, I mean, you know what I mean? So anyway, whenever Tyler initially said, I think it's this, our show topic today, I was kind of like, well, I mean, what? It's not that I doubt any of this kind of stuff. I always like to know, like, you know, what's the main goal here? You know what I mean? But also, boy, it is pretty weird that all these things started happening just like back to back and all that. I think, I don't know, I guess we better just get into it.
So, okay. All of that to say, Woody and I both firmly believe that all this stuff is fake.
I didn't say that I believe that it's
after
fake.
saying that, our topic today is a topic that, you know, and this is a conspiracy within itself called the dead internet theory. Go look into that. It's another one. But this is a topic that used to be a whole heck of a lot easier to find information on. But you will discover, if you do look into this on your own, that it's pretty hard to find anything.
I mean, I found it pretty quick.
Well, I think if you know the gentleman's name, then it's a little easier. But I'm just saying for like not like us who are gonna, you know, do crazy deep dives down the rabbit trail. Like I'm talking about like your average person. You know, they type in the term, immediately it's going to come up fake, you know, conspiracy theory, whatever. But anyway, the topic today is Project Bluebeam. It was started by a man named, I've heard two pronunciations. I've heard Serge and I've heard Serge. I think it's probably Serge because he was sort of a, you know, French-speaking Canadian.
Yeah.
But it was by a Canadian journalist named Serge Monast who released a, they say manifesto, but it's sort of like a
book, right?
Yeah, but it's not quite long enough to be a book. It's like maybe like a pamphlet, maybe. Anyway,
he sounds legit already.
Well, no. No, he was like a legit.
No, I know. It's just funny to me. Like whenever I think of somebody just like handing pamphlets out, I'm like, whoops.
Right.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. Or like those like punk zines.
Well, no, those are cool.
Yeah, no, I know. That's what I'm talking about. That's for you, Clay. But anyway, he released a manifesto in 1994 that, and I'm sort of paraphrasing here, but he basically lays out that there was a sort of tactic that would involve the UN, NASA, and certain elements of the U.S. government, U.S. military. What he's probably talking about there is like what now we sort of refer to as like black projects or like the shadow government. It's like people that you'll never know their names, and they're people that are sort of making the calls to instruct like the actual politicians that we know of. That's like a whole other thing. But basically, it's this plan. Project Bluebeam was this plan. It's a 4-step plan that was basically created to, I mean, I guess like form like a one world religion that would ultimately sort of lead to a one world government. Serge Monast was like as his sort of research went on, he did a whole lot into like the New World Order.
And so you're saying like, what you're saying is Project Bluebeam in itself has multiple sort of stages or whatever. Its ultimate goal is to create this sort of New World Order / universal religion, global dictatorship, ultimately just to install whatever larger group is behind it all, give them power, and just have their thumb on humans collectively, right?
And again, I mean, this is stuff that like, it's funny because I can see this guy, and again, another thing that's hard about this is like, anything that you find on Serge, it's all in French. So, you know, even like his writings and stuff, like it's kind of like, you know, any videos that you find, which are amazing. I mean, they're like from like 80s, early 90s. And like, it's just a great era, you know, to see this like sort of conspiracy theorist guy. I just wish it was in English. But yeah, basically it's this 4-step plan that, I mean, kind of goes along with your World Economic Forum, kind of this.
Are you going to lay out these?
Yeah. I'm going to lay them out.
Okay.
But it does go in line with, I think, you know, it's kind of a shame that he wouldn't be able to see this stuff kind of come into fruition. But some of the stuff that we're looking at as like like our carbon footprint, our carbon credit system that's coming in, our social credit score, like all this stuff, like whether you're conspiratorial or not, like it is leading in a direction of a lot more control in the hands of, the government instead of its people. And that's pretty scary.
Yeah. Hold on real quick. Now, I have to say this too, folks. This is the first time I'm learning of it. Tyler gave me strict instruction.
I did.
To not look up anything. So I think probably so that I wouldn't have any rebuttals, since everything in the world is
No.
is a hologram. But like,
I'm probably actually closer to what you think.
I don't know, but
You'll see.
I haven't heard it all yet. But what I'm saying is this. I do have a couple quick questions.
Okay.
So if that's okay, I'm just going to throw them in there. I'm not trying to interrupt you.
I mean, I haven't laid out any of the steps yet.
Well, my question is like, how is this guy sort of privy to this information? Is this a theory he sort of just kind of uncovered, or like
and this can kind of get deep too, but I'm not going to spend too much time into this. So apparently he had several connections who would later come out to actually, that video that I sent you, she was, the assistant. So after World War II, there was a thing called Project Paperclip. After the Nazi sort of regime was overthrown, the U.S. and the Russians took their top scientists and sort of split them up and took all of those, great minds of the Nazi Party. In that, the head of those, or like sort of the greatest one of all, which again, I mean, to me, it's like, even this is like hard to believe, but it was a guy named Werner von Braun. And von Braun was him and Jack Parsons, like they would go on to literally create NASA. So a lot of the things that we know of as commonplace, like with NASA, was literally created by like a top Nazi scientist. And so a lot of the information, and he never would name his source as far as this part goes, but a lot of this was basically...
He being Sergei?
Sergei, yes.
Okay.
A lot of this was coming directly from Werner von Braun near the end of his life. And so basically he was saying this, I think he was saying it in like maybe the 60s, I think. I'm not sure like when he died or not, but he was saying that like basically this technology was already in, kind of in the works or whatever.
Okay.
And so then later on, you would find that Werner von Braun's assistant basically comes out and says, yeah, every bit of it is totally true, which is pretty interesting. One of Sergei's connections, like informants, it was like I think it was like some sort of, intergovernmental person, was also said to, apparently they were supposedly like taken out, as they say in the biz. But anyway, wait, did you have any other questions?
No. So basically, what's his name? Serge Monast is an investigative journalist.
Yep.
He, for whatever reason, maybe we don't know, I'm not sure, was kind of able to kind of interview or potentially get into that circle and find out. And this is where the theory came from.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
It came from like.
I'm just making sure it's not just like he. Of course, to buy into it all, we have to believe that Sergei did speak to those people, the assistant, all that. I mean,
right.
More than one person, more than one quote unquote witness in a situation that has the same story, kind of is a pretty strong thing there. But
yeah, well, let me say that. So I guess in his Project Bluebeam like manifesto, he names this woman that was like an informant and was very close to von Braun. And then I think, much later is when she came out and like pretty much backed every bit of it up. So he never like named her, I'm guessing for her protection.
Yeah, sure.
But then she would come out and basically, say that every bit of it was true.
All right, let's get into the stages.
Okay, so the stages.
We will return after these messages.
America's future can be determined by our dreams and our visions.
It was very intense, bright light.
For over 200 years, there have been reports of giant man-like creatures
From another dimension, another world, I don't know.
the most intriguing mystery on the North American continent.
This is Joshua Cutchin, and you're at my home for weirdness. That would be rad.
Okay, let me say this. So I think, before I get into the stages, I think one thing about Project Bluebeam is that everything has to happen exactly like it was laid out by Serge Monast. In my opinion, I think there's a lot of things that he was probably dead on with, but then I think there's other things, as with, whether you're a good guy or a bad guy, like you're going to adapt with the times. So there's a lot of things that, again, this is in 94, he had no way, and the bad guys probably had no way of knowing that like the internet would become such a big thing, in society. You still there?
Yeah.
Oh,
I'm just taking it all in.
Oh, okay. No, it sounded really quiet. So there's a lot of these things.
It's called listening. I know, look, I know since we're just introducing, we're educating. That's what happens when people listen. They're quiet. Go ahead.
So a lot of these things, I think people look at as like, oh, well, this thing didn't happen, so this is clearly fake.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay, so you're saying that if you're going to lay out these stages here in a second of the things that were said to happen, you're saying a lot. Some of the ways that people discredit it immediately is if these stages are slightly different here and there. Now, I think it is important to kind of say this is not someone that's quote unquote. This isn't a prediction of the future. No. Like a.
He's not like a prophet.
Right.
Like
He's saying like, hey, this is a project that I'm aware of as of now in 1994. And yes, dude, I think that's a cheap way. And look, I'm not saying that I buy into this even at all. I'm just saying that's a cheap, skeptical approach.
Yeah.
If it doesn't happen in the same way. I mean, everybody listening right now, think about your last 10 years. Did they happen exactly like you planned? What about today's daily, hourly schedule? Did that happen? Or did something interrupt it and you had to pivot and make a change?
Right, exactly.
That's what you're saying.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And also, like, this information, I think the majority of this information is coming from, information that was taken from von Braun in the 60s or 70s at the absolute latest. So, it's like, if you, like, really? You don't think that the shadow government or like the banking cabal, you don't think they're going to change their plan and like adapt, when new stuff comes out, So anyway, so the original sort of idea, the first plan was basically this technology that would cause like earthquakes. And before you laugh, there is technology.
We just had one in Turkey. Go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, exactly. We just had one in Turkey. There's this thing called HAARP technology, HAARP. It gets into like weather manipulation, and there's a lot of sort of shadiness there too. I mean, this is like a full-on, I've dropped some real big conspiracy gems on the show.
There's a lot of threads that lead to other theories and stuff too, correct?
Right.
Yeah, okay.
So the first plan is basically these
first stage.
Right. These earthquakes are caused, and in these earthquakes, there are relics and artifacts that are found, and basically these artifacts are going to be used to like invalidate like religions all around the world, right?
Okay.
And so
I'm if I'm too silent whenever you're saying something, it's because I'm writing it down. Just because, again, this is the first time I'm hearing this, and I'm okay. So stage one is earthquakes. Within the earthquakes, they're like, hey, whoa, what's this?
Right.
Indiana Jones pops around the corner. He says, oh, God, man, this is a Casio watch. But that's impossible. It couldn't have been from...
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, and a lot of it, I think it's probably, and I'll reserve like what I believe in until we get to the end. But yeah, it's basically all these artifacts are sort of, upheaved, and between that and then using like the media and Hollywood, what's called predictive programming. That's like another sort of CIA thing where you'll see things in Hollywood, like you'll see things in the media, in movies, years before these things actually happen. And there's a reason that like there's a whole other sort of conspiracy side to that as well, but it's called predictive programming. So he believed at the time that like, and I can't remember the examples he had, but like, like Close Encounters and yada, yada, yada.
Well, it's kind of like, just listening to this, it's kind of like the example that you use often when talking about folklore surrounding like things like fairies and stuff, and Peter Pan, for example, and then Disney kind of, taking that. Now, I think Disney did that because there's good stories within that, and then they watered it down to make it a marketing thing for kids to watch. But like,
I used to, man, but once you really look into like Disney and again,
come on, there's just too many threads, and this is part of the reason, ladies and gentlemen, why I typically I don't even. Yeah, it's not my cup of tea necessarily, and then it just starts going everywhere, and then your mind's just like, I'm just gonna stay inside for the rest of the.
All I'm gonna say is you can find the official FISA documents where the CIA physically helped fund
Peter Pan,
Walt Disney building Walt Disney World in Florida. Like they literally paid for the swampland for the park to be built. So why is that, And then you have Project Mockingbird. That's another one. Go look it up. But anyway, so first stage, earthquakes.
Well, now I'm like super intrigued. Why is that? Why would they? What's the theory behind them?
So Project Mockingbird gets into this thing where
I'm talking about them funding the...
Yeah, so because it's all, again, it's tied into like some of this like predictive programming, and some of it is like subliminal like messaging through his like cartoons and movies and like little things that they were actually able to... I mean, this is its own episode. But it's similar to how... And again, this is one of those things that was so heartbreaking when I found it. And we did an episode on this, but it's similar to how when you look into like the Laurel Canyon sort of scene of music in the 60s, like Crosby, Stills, and Nash, the Doors, the list goes on and on and on. All of those were from Laurel Canyon, right? When you really look into it, every single band that made it big back then, every single one had parents that were in high levels of the U.S. military and or CIA ties. I mean, Jim Morrison from the Doors, his dad was an admiral, and he literally is the guy who signed off on the Gulf of Tonkin, which would go on to start the Vietnam War. So like there's all this stuff. Oh, and then it's also a known fact that like the big like sort of LSD craze at the time was the CIA they're the one who funneled the drugs into the scene. And it's like there's a lot of different, it's sort of social manipulation, and you can, the Tavistock Institute was one that was like sort of the British version of that, but it gets deep. But anyway.
Back to stage one.
Back to stage one, or stage two now. So the stage two, and there's a train going by right now, which...
Okay, sorry, hold on, I got another question. So what's the... if someone finds these artifacts, these new artifacts, that like what? What are they? What's the purpose of having planted artifacts? And then like how are they planting them? This is basically whoever discovers them is in on it. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I would imagine. I mean, okay. I don't know. I mean, I haven't looked into the specifics of that, but I would imagine that it would have to be somebody sort of
Now, has that been, like, the only thing that sounds like to me, I don't know if this is the part of the show that you want me to get into that, is it sort of sounds like to me like all those other things that you send me, where it's like, the old earth stuff and like...
like Tartaria and stuff?
Yeah, because all that stuff sort of...
It kind of does.
It seems like if you are planting artifacts, the only purpose I can think of is to sort of... and I think you kind of mentioned this earlier, sort of just kind of dissolve the belief that you have, whatever belief system that is. It doesn't matter if it's Christianity or Buddhism. Like we all have in our dogma and our own personal zeitgeist, an idea of how things went based on our own timeline and belief system, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So that's the only reason why. Is that the purpose that they're doing?
So I believe that stage one, and again, you know, I think it's important to just continue to sort of harp on this, that like surely there's some like pivoting. So if this is coming from like the 60s, you know, obviously, hey, maybe we don't do this step. Maybe we do. Like, I think because of the birth of like, you know, like the media and like, you know, the nightly news and Hollywood and stuff, I don't even know that this part is super relevant. I mean, I see the reasoning behind it. The reasoning is to, hey, here's this artifact that we found that actually says that, you know, Jesus, like it starts to sort of jumble like timelines, and it sort of starts just to create to create a shadow of doubt on like a theological level. Right.
Okay. So you're saying like maybe they go to the cross and in Latin it translated to John Teeter.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. And so stage 2, which is probably, you know, they're definitely ramping it up by stage 2. Stage 2 is basically using satellite technology to, you know, and I love that he uses like such old school terminology like beam holograms. But stage 2 was to basically create these holograms all over the world of like these sort of religious icons, whether it's Jesus, Muhammad, Buddha, yada, yada, yada. And then basically, okay, so all of these religious symbols are going to start showing up. So I guess maybe that was like sort of to make people start to take notice, you know what I mean? Of like, whoa, what's happening here? And then basically it would, there's a sort
already got a problem.
Well, listen, so it's to create these religious characters all around the world.
That they just discredited in stage 1, but go ahead. Keep going.
Well, yeah, I don't necessarily believe in, well, we'll get into that later. But again, stage 1 is shedding doubt. Stage 2, you're suddenly seeing these things. And again, this was written, you know, 60s, 70s. So you have to sort of think of it through that lens, I think, also. Okay. These, you know, hologram technology that is completely so realistic and so amazing that suddenly people are like, whoa. And this ties in with stage, well, so they're going to basically communicate to the people that, and even the way he lays it out, he's like, you know, for the U.S., you know, it's clearly a Christian country. For, you know, this country, it's clearly a you know, Muslim country. And like, it's very sort of black and white, you know, which I don't necessarily think that it's like that really anymore. But anyway, it ultimately, this hologram would sort of project into all these religions, whether it's Jesus, Buddha, Muhammad, they would all combine like a Voltron into...
Oh, no way,
listen,
dude. For real?
Into one like sort of supreme being. And it would say, it would basically tell the people that, hey, everything that you've read, some of it's right, but some of it's wrong. And this is correct over here. Muhammad, Jesus, Buddha, we are all the same entity. Which is a little problematic.
Well, hold on a second. And I was so taken aback just now when you said like Voltron. Yeah. I did not see that coming. So basically we got like Power Ranger deities that are going to be
kind of, yeah.
Like, yeah. But you know, it's funny, dude, like and we kind of talked about this specifically accidentally the other day when you and I were just talking in general, because I think, again, I know there's people that when they hear the word conspiracy theory are just immediately like off, you know.
I mean,
and I get that.
It's
right?
it's all on purpose though.
Yeah. Well, and what's interesting is like to me, things like this, it is hard for me to kind of fathom it just happening in general.
Right.
But like, guys, we are living in a weird time. This isn't 1994 now. I think it would be a lot easier. In some ways, I think we're fortunate because, like, I think if this would have been successful by 1994, it would have been way more sellable.
Exactly.
You know what I'm saying? Because, like, nowadays, we already have, forget about secret technology that exists. We already have public technology that exists. Like, have you seen those stinking...
The dolphins?
I mean, they do it like, that, but just...
That's crazy.
Also, like, drone shows at the Olympics, man.
Oh,
or
yeah.
at Stone Mountain.
Yeah, I was about to say, we saw it at Stone Mountain. It's
right?
amazing.
It's like, it's incredible and it's not secret, right? So if we can do that already, I just imagine, like, and, you know, I almost... you know, I almost don't even want to say this out loud to give a bad guy like an idea, but like, you know, it's going to be, unfortunately, like if you're Christian, for example, and I don't know enough about, let's say, Buddhism or Hinduism or even Islam in terms of whether or not there's a trope of like a return or a second coming, so to speak. But let's just, for a second, if you're Christian, you're familiar with the idea that at some point, you know, there's going to be like a time when, you know, there's a return, right?
Yeah.
And so, like, if that happened now, and it was really happening, and Ann and I talk about this all the time. Even if we were like looking at it in the sky, happening in real time, we'd still be like, well, but isn't? I mean, is it just a hologram?
Yeah, right. Well, and
anyway.
And also you, I mean, you touched on like a really important part with like the Christianity side. I'll get into that later. But so this thing appears, it sort of joins into one, so that like everybody on the planet can see this thing, right? And then also plays into Revelation, you know, in Christianity at the end times where, you know, God appears and everyone can see him, basically.
And I'll tell you something else that it plays into, man. Woody. I'm sorry, dude. It also, before I forget, it also plays into, well, you know, it's not my fault, dude. I didn't know anything about this, so it's just like I'm learning all this stuff in real time. It also plays into a simulation theory.
Well, I'll go one step even further. I wonder if you know, all eyes will see this thing, and even in Project Bluebeam, you know, everybody will see this thing all across the world. Everybody will be able to see it. I wonder if that's actually a sort of a simplified version of it, us having the internet.
Oh, I mean, look,
you know what I mean?
That's an interesting way to describe it at a time when the internet
they would have
they
would have had no idea. Yeah.
Wow,
yeah.
That's interesting. Okay.
So I don't know. I think that's been one of my thoughts for a while now, as far as like
that's cool.
You know, everybody will see, you know, when God comes back or Jesus comes back. Anyway, so
sorry, I was just going to say, if it happens by the time these people have heard this, that the Voltron God, you know. Okay, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. So stage 3 is to use basically like telepathic communication to pretty much like explain all this stuff, which is an interesting thing because we've had like what's called neuroelectromagnetic devices since 1972 that we know of. And basically how it works is they're able to sort of process this speech, which is also interesting too, because, you know, now it's much more advanced. But even back then in 1972, if you think about it, hey, we're going to hit this area, this area, this area. So you just do that exact language with that exact dialect, and you're sending out the same messages, and it's sort of hiding in these little mini bands of frequency in between like the main sort of frequency bands. You know what I mean?
Yeah, dude. I mean, my mind is going 1,000 miles an hour here because, like, thinking about it, well, I don't know.
And so the thing is, too, is like these would all be done on in like inaudible frequencies. So it would be just like it would sound like it was a personal thing in your mind, right? And that's actually a thing that's, on the market. So sort of the standard sort of thought is that, whether it's, black budget, we think of like Cambridge Analytics or Boston Dynamics or DARPA or ARPA. Like these are things that, which by the way, the first like director of DARPA, which is, where you see like those robot dogs and like, they're supposedly they're like the, at the front of the line as far as like new advancements. That's Tesla's or Elon Musk's grandpa, which is pretty interesting. But yeah, I digress. So they were using this technology already back in 1972, but now it's called voice to skull tech. And you'll see it in like cities and stuff with like ads where like if you walk through. Have you experienced this?
Nothing that I can think of that I could describe as a voice to skull.
Yeah, well, I mean that's sort of like the term for it, and that gets into like some real crazy stuff, like a thing called gang stalking, which is like
slow your roll. Talk to me about what kind of ads I should have experienced.
Okay, so I was in New York like several years ago, and there's like this one place that you can stand, or you could. I don't know if it's actually. You know what? Maybe it was like a Stranger Things ad. I can't remember, but you would stand in this one place and only you could hear this ad. And then, you would look up. I'm pretty sure it was in Times Square where like the giant, screen is. Mm-hmm. And, like whatever ad was playing, you would personally hear the audio, but only in this like little special field or like bubble.
Yeah.
That wasn't audible to like anyone else. So it literally sounded like it was coming from your mind. So like we already have this stuff, even on like a sort of semi-commercial level, but it's been around forever. The interesting thing is that eventually this sort of, telepathic communication, which is a thing that was also used at Montauk, which they called synthetic telepathy.
Yeah.
And they would use it to induce like, basically people thought they were schizophrenic. They thought they were, they thought they were going crazy because they were able to like hear stuff and it was clearly coming from their head, but little did they know, they're being manipulated. And so that would like sort of ramp up, I think. And, and to me, this third stage is a little vague. I don't totally understand this part, but apparently he talked about how basically the synthetic telepathy would eventually be used. It would sort of ramp up into also making people be able to see like ghosts in their house, poltergeist activity, hearing like demons in their heads. Like, so I think it's just that further sort of like destabilization of humanity, if you will, And so it would, therefore that would sort of lead you into like this continued thinking of like, well, maybe this new Voltron god, maybe this is right. Maybe like, because I don't know what's going on. I'm seeing demons around my house and like, think I'm going crazy. And so it would lead to that. The one thing that you brought up before, which is a really good point about like Christianity, is as far as I know, it's the only religion that has a revelation where it sort of lays it out in like a preview. So the idea in Christianity is that, there is an antichrist comes on the scene who's a guy who's like, hey, I can help you. I can solve all the problems, right? And I think...
it's so weird that you said that Elon Musk was the freaking...
Yeah, I know, it's weird, isn't it? Although he did come out recently and say that...
He was at the global... I think it was like the global government summit saying global government is not good.
Yeah, which is pretty awesome. He
says, is also a guy that like I don't know if you know this. You probably do if you're a fan of Elon Musk, but like, did you know that Tesla's patents are open source? They're not secret. And his reasoning behind that is that like that would go against their company mission, which is to make the earth a better place. So if someone out there wants to make an electric car and wants to make a better one, his whole point is then that just means I need to work harder.
Yeah.
That's incredible. Dude, it's incredible.
Amazing.
But now putting on the lens of It being like, everything that I remember of like the Antichrist is like someone that's charismatic, can solve a lot of problems. Holy crap, I'm starting to get scared now.
Right. Well, I think I really like him. I think that, like what you say, like his sort of altruism, I like that idea, but there are like...
There's some quirks, man.
There's some little things that like, it's like, man, like just, and it's mainly like just some like connections that he has that sort of leads me to believe that, like, I don't know, man, is this like a big like psyop within itself, But anyway, so the idea it's just this continual sort of like shaking off of like quote unquote like old religions. So and I think this also that you have to sort of put this in scale is like this is over the course of like several years too. So it's this like ramping up, Yeah. And then stage 4, a fake alien invasion. And basically the reason for that, and I mean, I like Reagan. I think Reagan was awesome. But if you look at his speech where he's talking about like, well, if we had an extraterrestrial threat, maybe that would be the thing that we would need to all band together and come together as one,
Yeah, dude, it's funny though. Like even like you and I were probably too young to actually like just be sitting in front of the TV and being able to consume that information and be like, I guess he's probably right.
But I was.
Come on. But like it is a topic of conversation that I've had with folks before, like when it is annoying as heck, when, well, I mean, just like today, for example, like our country's getting more and more divided, seemingly, right? Now, when I'm around folks from all walks of life, in real life, it doesn't really seem like we're divided necessarily, but, topics of conversation can get a little heated at the Thanksgiving dinner table nowadays. That's been the case for a while though, right? In terms of part of the things that I've talked about with folks is like, well, what is like something that would like bring us on all together? Well, it's happened throughout history, not alien invasions, but like war can typically bring a country together, right? Like World War II, everybody's working together. We've got a single goal no matter who you are, right?
Right.
I think it was attempted to kind of do that in different wars, but over time it's become less and less so. So it's like, what would unite us globally?
Yeah.
And it's like, you look at these stages,
right?
And it's like, okay, we've wiped out our belief system because now we have Voltron.
Right.
And there's all these other things happening. Well, I mean, what can save us? Only Voltron can save us.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so this alien invasion happens. I don't know if it's strictly, if the, quote unquote, like UFOs are strictly holographic, or if there's also like a combination. I mean, if we're looking at it as like 100% reality, maybe some of these that we're seeing on the news are...
Please just stick to one
we
conspiracy
never went
theory.
to the moon.
Just stick to one conspiracy theory.
Maybe some are like our own, and it's sort of, to sort of push the theater of it all. But anyway, there's this alien invasion that sort of, and again, this Serge Monast which sounds a lot like monastic. So that's interesting. But he was coming from a place, he was a Christian, and so he was coming from the mindset of, again, it taught, in the Bible, in Christianity, it talks about, the Antichrist brings forth this one world government, one world religion, and it's kind of crazy because now we're looking at like I said before, the World Economic Forum and like, all this stuff about depopulation with like Bill Gates, and it's like, it's kind of crazy that it's like there's a lot of these things that are being like, these boxes are like being ticked off. But basically the invasion comes, that's sort of the last straw that sort of leads the people to be like you said, oh, the only way that I can be saved is the government comes to help me. And by this point, all governments, and like I said before, all of this was between the UN, NASA, and certain aspects of the U.S. government. So, even just that on its own, this like push lately for like us to oh, we all need to be one united nation. So we would have a one world government. We would have a, and a lot of people, this is sort of a side topic, but a lot of people believe that, if you are looking at it from the Christian perspective, a lot of people believe that this sort of one world religion is actually like a form of like scientism. It's not an actual religion. I mean, this kind of goes against Project Bluebeam's, proposals, but
explanation of it, yeah.
Yeah, but they kind of believe that like, well, maybe this sort of, because I mean, look back in the last 3 years and what'd you hear the most? Oh, just trust the science. Trust the, it's like, oh, well, that's so stupid because science tells me this. You know what I mean? So it sort of takes the faith out of it. Anyway, back on topic. There's this sort of new world order, one government kind of thing appears to be the only thing that can help people, which in turn creates like a population that's willing to just freely give up their rights for safety. In this, there is a sort of a planned economic collapse. And, ultimately that gives up physical currencies, which I think we're already pretty close to that anyway. And he even talks.
Dude, I haven't paid for something in cash.
No, I haven't either. But I'm saying once you get rid of an actual physical currency, it is a little bit of a scary thing if you really start looking into it. Because there's complete control.
Dude, that's 100%. I mean, not to knock everybody that just put it all into Dogecoin or whatever. Mm-hmm. Like, you're telling me they can hack into X, Y, and Z, but they can't just
exactly.
Jeez.
Yeah, exactly. And you're starting to see too, where I can't remember. It's like some massive bank. They just came out and said that, hey, we're about to adopt this protocol where no matter how much money, say I'm a like multi-billionaire, you're only allowed to take out 20,000 at a time. So if this kind of goes into play, I mean, because, you think of it, it's like, I mean.
Well, you remember, like, that's part of the reason, that's one of the things that happened during the Great Depression, right?
Mm-hmm.
And why so many things collapsed is because in panic, everyone went in and pulled out all their money and all those financial institutions. What's scary, I was talking about this the other day. We drove by this, it was when I was on that road trip with my dad and my brother. Mm-hmm. We drove by this little bitty bank, dude, that was just on this exit because we needed to fill up and use the restroom and stuff. Tiny, tiny little community bank. And I was just, for fun, thinking in my head, like, a place like that, how much actual physical money do you think they actually have?
Barely
there?
any.
Right.
It's all
so it's all stored somewhere, but it's like if people come in, and that's part of the reason why they started to do that, to avoid like, large theft and
that's what they
just
say.
Like panicking and pulling it out.
Right.
Yeah, I know, but dude, we can also, the hard part about all this too is just like at the end of the day too, human behavior, we're just a bunch of freaking idiots sometimes. Like that's the reason why, in a lot of times when everything like it happens here in the South, all the time, ever since ever. If it's going to snow, you go to the dadgum store and you're not going to be able to find bread, milk, or eggs. Right?
Well, I'm glad you brought that up because that's the exact mentality that all of this is relying on, to sort of push that control. It's all that like fear-based kind of like, which, I mean, if you look at, pretty much every mainstream news network is like, it's the same kind of thing. It's just, maybe it's from like a different perspective, but there's so much like fear mongering and like, we'll get into that in a minute, but it's this like total fear. So if you think about it, like, okay, man, I just found out it's going to snow on Friday. The entire grocery store gets bought up because of fear, which is it's valid, but you think of it as like, okay, now there's an alien invasion. A year ago, we just saw this giant being appear in the sky that's telling us that like all the world religions got it wrong, and this is this new thing that we need to follow. Like there's so many. Now I'm seeing poltergeists in my house. I'm hearing things in my mind. There's so much like destabilization, which is kind of what like the CIA is kind of, that's their bread and butter. That's sort of social destabilization and stuff. I mean, you look at like, So anyway, so there's this this economic collapse follows, gets rid of all physical currencies, and he even kind of talks about like the social credit system, which actually China is like beginning to opt in, and they have been since 2014. But it's just this sort of entering into this sort of like thing, and it is weird because like, well, let me say this. I think, and I kind of set it up top, but let me like clarify. I think for people that, like, for example, I really like Jeremy Corbell, and I love George Knapp. Jeremy Corbell did a fantastic documentary called Lazar about Bob Lazar. Amazing, incredible. I kind of have a little bit different opinions now on him as a whole, but when I follow him on social media and stuff, and when you go to like the comment sections, when he's saying, I think he just like wants to believe so much, that it's like.
That's kind of what I was talking about at the beginning of the community that really has been studying these UFOs for so long and that kind of thing. And again, this is I in a way kind of consider myself somewhat of an outsider only because they're relatively speaking newer to me, these figures in the community, right? And to me, he kind of strikes, especially after like his approach sort of about these recent things from what I've seen, it's sort of like he makes some good points. One of them being like, if China admits to this one, then if these other three or however many, were another government, it seems like we would hear about that, and there would be, I don't know. I guess he's using that to sort of say that they potentially are extraterrestrial. I don't know. It's interesting to me. He strikes me as someone that says, or is thinking at this point, like, I'm kind of drawing the line in the sand a little bit, and I'm not budging.
Yeah, it's a really interesting thing because I feel like I'm the guy, like I said at the top of the show, I feel like I'm the guy who wants to, like the X-Files thing. I want to believe. I want all this stuff to be real. I want it to be extraterrestrials. I want it to be, and I have since, the fifth grade when me and my best friend Jesse Phillips had we saw a UFO. Like, these are things that like I've always like been super into, but I feel like there's a difference between that mentality that I just sort of laid out and then Jeremy Corbell, which I think he does really great work, but I also think that he's relying on a lot of like what the government is telling him. It's like he's not really going to be coming out talking about stuff with like Roswell, like a Stanton Friedman. He's going to be talking about like, well, Louis Elizondo said that this pilot saw this, and then the Pentagon came out and they disclosed this. I don't believe any of that stuff. I'm not saying I think the pilots are just as sort of fooled as much as we are, really. You know what I mean? And I think in some ways that probably sort of cements the credibility even more that, when you have like a bad, F-22 pilot come out and be like, hey man, this thing, shot up and it was faster than anything we've ever seen. And I think he's being truthful. I don't necessarily think that, but I'm just saying, like, I think there's a strong difference with where he is now, where he's real, like every post is really tied to like this sort of like government thing. And it's a little like Stephen Greer, his big thing with like, oh, well, we have to have like full disclosure in the government. It's like, that, as far as we know, they've been 100% lying to us since 1947. So it's like, I just think it's naive that like suddenly they're going to come out and tell us everything. And then I'm even more dubious when suddenly in 2019, suddenly everything is like transparent. They're changing the terminology. It's just like, okay, so you've denied it for 100 years, but now suddenly you want to make it transparent. And then in my opinion, they're doing that because they're going to use it for something. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. I mean,
because there's no other reason to do that.
Well, the only other thing that I can, this is one of those situations where it's like, if it's one or the other, I'm not sure which one's the scariest. And like the other potential reason would be like, there's so many of these things in the air. Now, again, take yourself out of the Project Bluebeam thing for just a second. And there's so many of these things that are flying around.
Yeah, right.
And we don't know how to explain it, that we're going to be called out. And then you know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah. Well, you and I, and this is, I think, where you're going with this. You and I had a talk whenever we first started talking about this, and I think you thought that I was saying, because I kind of broke it down like a very loose to Woody as far as like,
yeah, it was real loose.
No
it
way, it's
like
Project Bluebeam.
It's all fake.
Yeah. I think you were saying that like you were thinking that I was saying that like. All these UFO sightings all across the world, all of it's fake, every bit of it. I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying I actually believe in all that stuff. I totally believe in Bigfoot. I believe in, a lot of cryptids. I believe in UFO sightings. I believe in, whatever. But I think this hologram sort of thing and this sort of tie with like Project Bluebeam is a totally separate thing. I think this is manipulating and using that years of like actual real sightings, and it's using it against us basically,
Yeah. It's just, yeah.
No, go ahead. What were you gonna say?
I was just gonna say this is part of the reason why I always kind of get like throw my hands up and just I give up, and not in a negative way against you. I'm just saying like in just these kind of theories and stuff sometimes, because it's like, if we've had the technology to be able to fake this kind of stuff at this level for so long, then like it really becomes like certain things make sense, like no evidence or the footprints ending. Whenever you're looking at like physical evidence of things like Bigfoot phenomenon and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
It becomes hard. And like I feel in a way, if the technology exists and it is all sort of like, BS, you got to feel bad for the folks that are out there trudging through the mud in the woods to try to find something physical that, might not.
But I personally think that all that's still true. I don't think this has anything to do with that. I think this is, shitty.
But I mean, it kind of sounded like, that's what I was saying. I was writing some notes down, and it's like all the weird, like sort of poltergeist stuff and things like that just make everything seem like, oh man, just the world's crazy. There's creatures everywhere and all this. Disembodied voices. There's an explanation there. I don't know.
So, those are kind of the four stages. A couple things sort of following this line in the timeline. Serge Monast, this would be a little bit before, but he founded the Free Press Agency, and that's where he would like publish his theories about like the New World Order. And one of the things that he does say that is like a constant is like a lot of this stuff has been tried before but has failed or been like thwarted. And I think that's an important sort of aspect to this, because it shows that he's not just like, oh, it has to be exactly, these four stages have to 100% happen exactly how it's laid out. And that's how it's all going to play out. Like, I don't even think he necessarily believed that it had to be. But right. I will say, and like you said earlier, being in 1994, it was a heck of a lot easier to believe then than it is now.
Oh, dude, if Voltron came into the sky in 94, that's right. Game over, dude. Like, I'd be like, yep, sign me up. I believe it. You know? And that's what I was kind of saying earlier, and that's the unfortunate part, in a way. That if something even good for, like, if you're a Christian happening, it would be difficult. You know what I'm saying? Like, it would be very difficult to sort of physically believe it with your own eyes if you were seeing it happen. Yeah. And that's the unfortunate part, because technology has now reached this point where it's very easy to make something look incredibly good. Man, I don't know.
I mean, I will say this, and I think I sent this to you. It's over Alaska. So, where you saw like one of the UFOs like pass by, like this footage, you see this weird like these like green. It looks like it's like scanning almost. Did you see that?
Oh yeah. I think that's that's. If you haven't seen this yet, you should have by now because it's just all over the internet as well. It looks almost like
I think it's part of
these
the
green lasers kind of coming down and like from an alien movie, dude. You know?
Yeah.
Like,
but to me, it looks like when I saw that, I'm like, okay, there's Project Bluebeam.
It also kind of looks like this dang drone, or it looks like Stone Mountain too. I mean, all the laser shows.
Yeah, but the scale of this is like apparently like massive. I think like, you know what I'm saying? Like it wasn't like, oh well, this is like in a space of like 200 feet. Like it was like like way back, like you know, a mile up in the air. And they say, I think the official thing is like, oh, it's just a Chinese satellite. Which again, what?
Yeah, I mean, like that's the thing to me. It's like okay, and again, I'm not necessarily leaning toward like, well, it's got to be Project Bluebeam, but okay, if it is a Chinese satellite, so like either way you slice it, like I'm uncomfortable. Yeah, you know what I mean? Like I'm not happy about this because what does that mean? Ultimately, I always think about this in these situations, and I hope people have lasted this long because the one thing that I definitely wanted to say when we even just started talking about and thinking about this episode was,
we'll return after these messages.
There's something out there waiting for us. And it ain't no man.
Hey, this is Bryce Johnson from the Bigfoot Collectors Club, and you're listening to Tyler and Woody on That Would Be Rad, because that is rad.
Like, ultimately, I think in these situations where it's potential, I always think about it in terms of, like, how can I sort of protect my family, right? And the important thing is, no matter which way you slice it, if it's an alien invasion, if it's the government trying to, you know, exert control over you, or if you're going to see Voltron in the sky, the most important thing we can do is just, you know, make sure, and God, I wish I could remember the phrase, like, that my folks in, like, would say,
I know what you're
like,
I know
make sure your heart's good with God, you know, that kind of stuff. It's like we need to make sure that we're prepared in terms of, because, you know, it's real hard to exert control on somebody when you got enough stuff to just take care of yourself. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's
Let
true.
it kind of just shake out. Now, I'm not saying I do, so don't come after me, folks. I'm also just nervous about making an episode like this in general.
Well, just wait.
You know.
So from 1995 to 1996, and this was directly after well, let me add this. So his manuscript that he released before this Project Bluebeam one is literally about vaccinations, government control through vaccinations, mass pandemics. And it's like, I mean, this guy was on to something. I mean, this is like 94. So, you know, I find that really interesting. But over the course of 95 and 96, he was arrested several times. And it was always like, oh, we arrested the wrong guy, or and then it was said that he had a warrant and was wanted by being involved with, and this is like quotes, networks of prohibited information. I'm guessing that's like probably a Canadian thing, you know, because their sort of free speech laws are a little different, so it's not as like protected. His two little girls that he homeschooled for years were taken away by Child Protective Services and placed in public education and with like the sort of, I guess, like welfare type system. There's also some evidence with that like one of the girls just pretty much like disappeared, which is kind of, I don't know like enough about it, and it's hard to, it's hard to research just in general now, but it's especially hard once you start looking into his stuff, because it's mainly like in French, you know? So he would go on to die in 1996 at the young age of 51. He was mysteriously jailed the night before he would die. And again, there was like no reasoning. It was like, oh, we thought you were a different,
French Canadian.
Whatever. Yeah. He was released. He would go home. He was alone. And then he would die of a quote unquote heart attack. Now, from 95 to 96, when he started being sort of stalked or like followed by like the police and by like, official folks, I guess, he had said numerous times that if he died, for people to look into his death, that he was 100% being like tracked. He had no record of any sort of previous heart condition, perfectly healthy. And so when I read that, I thought about, so this is an interesting thing. And it's a little bit of a sort of a side note, but I think it plays into this, and I think it makes sense. So in 1975, after the Watergate scandal, the intelligence communities were really sort of put into the spotlight because there was a lot of sort of stuff that was like kind of shady, like a heavy like abuse of power. We're talking like the NSA, FBI, CIA. They would be put on the stand in Congress, questioned. I can't remember what it's called. I think it was called like the Church Committee or something. Mm-hmm. But like key figures were pulled into Congress. And in 1975, the head director of our favorite MKUltra project, which was an actual thing, the director of the MKUltra project was pulled to the stand, and he talked about, yes, there was the CIA did have a heart attack gun.
And the various devices for administering the toxin that were found in the laboratory certainly make it clear that purely defensive uses were not what the agency was limited to in any way. There were definite offensive uses. In fact, there were dart guns. You mentioned suicides. Well, I don't think a suicide is usually accomplished with a dart, particularly a gun that can place the dart in a human target in such a way that he doesn't even know that he's been hit.
There's no question about it. It was also for offensive reasons. No question.
Have you brought with you some of those devices which would have enabled the CIA to use this poison for?
We have indeed.
For killing people?
It was developed by a woman named Mary Embry, who joined the CIA or was recruited to the CIA at 18 years old. She was brought on to develop like natural and biological ways of neutralizing enemy threats. The heart attack gun was basically, it would use shellfish toxin that was like frozen and mixed with water into like a pellet or like a type of dart, so that basically if somebody shot you with it, it would hit you, then it would be in your system, into your bloodstream, but then because it was made of like a frozen material, it would dissolve away, leaving only like a very, very tiny like little red dot. So unless you knew to look for this, and I don't even think this was public knowledge until like the mid 2000s anyway, but she would go on to be part of MK Naomi, which was the successor to MKUltra. So a lot of people believe that like, well, maybe it was this like heart attack thing. I mean, there's a lot of like weaponry, black government weaponry. They say like there's like sound wave technology that can cause like heart attacks and stuff. But the CIA director, William Colby, would basically show the gun like on the stand, and it was called a non-discernible microbionoculator, and that was like on the Church Committee. Serge Monast was actually the character of Jerry Fletcher that Mel Gibson played in the 90s.
Okay. Yeah.
97 film Conspiracy Theory. I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah. Wait.
Okay,
start over. Sorry, because I thought you messed up and you're about to like call him. He was actually Mel Gibson, and so like that's what I was focused on. So I kind of
No, you're fine.
What you're saying is that character was based on him?
Yes. Yep.
Oh, cool.
Pretty cool. He would go on to, I think this was around the same time or after he would write his Project Bluebeam manuscript. And this is just to show like how sort of on it he was, which is really fascinating. He put out this thing called, it was called the Toronto Protocols, which was sort of the title was based off of this thing called the Protocols of the Elders of Zion, which is like this whole other thing. But he released this thing called Bread and Circus 1967. And if you've heard that phrase before, it goes back to like the Roman Empire. So they would release, your arena stuff, your like sports, like these big circuses and like spectacle. And it was basically to keep the public distracted from like the actual sort of political stuff that was happening. Here's how he lays out that, and again, a lot of this is from I don't necessarily believe that this is from the Werner von Braun's assistant that we talked about before. I think this was based off of his other informant, which, urban legend says that person would end up dead too. But number one, infiltrate the education system. So you're basically rewiring in what the kids know. Infiltrate the media, take over all news networks, and so you're able to sort of, skew the narrative however you want. Feed messaging through music and film, which Project Mockingbird, like I said before, CIA, buying the land for Disney, and then buying politicians, which you and I talk about this a lot, buying your politicians through funding from think tanks and special interest groups, and eventually it just falls into chaos. So that is pretty much Project Bluebeam. I think, I know we've gone a little longer than usual, but here's what I think. I think stage one, there was no need because, we have the internet. We don't really need all that. We don't need a newspaper, to show up in the daily news or your nightly news like channel saying, hey, this artifact was found, during this earthquake. I don't necessarily believe that the second one would play as well because, the hologram thing, I'm not sure that would even work with the internet. Maybe like I get it on its face.
In a way, it almost works better in a way for people that aren't.
Yeah. Kind
of like based on your theory that you're talking about where it's everybody can see it because we're watching it through
right.
the internet,
I think the third one, like the synthetic telepathy and like the thing, I think there's an element of that. I don't know that is in the works beyond like sort of targeted individuals, which have like come out and said that like they're being like followed, and it gets really weird. Like if you're interested in that, look into a thing called gang stalking, and it really is like fascinating, and it's terrifying also because it's basically these people that are for some reason targeted, which I believe they're pretty much picked at random, and it's just like a trial.
Make a podcast about this dadgum freaking theory.
Getting
followed around, man.
But it really utilizes that like voice to skull technology. So you think you're going crazy, which is, it's pretty amazing. I kind of think because we have the internet now, because we have just the media the way it is, I'm thinking, so let me say this, and this is what I was trying to say earlier, but I don't think I did. You go to like Jeremy Corbell's like post and you look in the thread and it's going to be like, this is bull. Project Bluebeam, hashtag Project Bluebeam. Everybody is like...
You're specifically talking about in reference to the things that are happening now, which is those UFOs that were shot down in February of 2023.
Yeah, the supposed 4 UFOs.
Yeah.
They were all shot down within 3 days, which I sound stupid even just saying it. But, you see all these people saying Project Bluebeam, but I think it's important for me to say that, like, for the people that do believe this, I think, so for me, I believe that there is an aspect of this that is taking place. However, I think stage 1, 2, and 3, is unnecessary at this point. I think this could lead into stage 4. I believe, like the alien invasion part, I think that's going to be sort of the nail in the coffin of, because we've already had, and believe what you will, and I'm not bashing anybody, but, with like the last 3 years, I mean, there's some clear manipulation because of this pandemic. Now, and it's also been said that it was created in a lab, and it's also been, there's a lot to that. We're not going to get into it because it gets heavily political. But I think, if you look at it, a lot of it was to, a lot of people think that like, oh, every bit of this was just a total test just to see how willing these people would be to give up their freedoms and their rights. And, then this Project Bluebeam, which again, step 4, is sort of the next step to sort of be the nail in the coffin. And I just think that's important to note that, like, when people say Project Bluebeam, I don't think maybe they are, but I think the majority of your sort of truthers or your conspiracy theorists out there are smart enough to like be like, we're talking about a portion of Project Bluebeam.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, like a fake alien invasion.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, I think here's what I'll say about it all. With 100% certainty, I can say this, that no matter what, it is weird that all this stuff is happening. And again, it really is simple, just a simple study of human behavior and psychology and stuff. If you were someone that wanted to exert control, boy, it's relatively laid out pretty simply, I mean, because at the end of the day, on the optimist side of things, I would say that, like, for the most part, like, humans and humanity, like, we do care for one another. We are, like, selfish in nature, though, too. And I don't mean that in a, I'll just put it this way. If something was happening, like, my family comes first before anything else.
Yeah, right.
And so that's where my selfish nature, it's a survival instinct that we have, more of like a biological, animalistic behavior, really.
And then our fans.
Well, of course, and then, yes, our fans. But I don't know what to think about it at all. It's super interesting. I think part of the other reason why I just entertained us doing a conspiracy theory in general, and again, I'm not trying to like throw shade or anything like that. It's just that for the most part, because there's always so many, like, in this, talk about this, and then this one, it's just like too much. I like to be able to focus on a single topic, and it is very interesting. I mean, this is very interesting stuff. And you can't, I don't think anybody out there listening can say, even if you think all of everything that this person, let's just say that this Serge Monast was a complete hoax or a hoaxer or just like crazy, delusional, whatever.
Right.
No matter what, I think we can all agree that, like, if any of those things happened, you can agree that, like, it would be pretty easy for us to all be like, oh God, well, we have to do this. I mean,
right.
know?
Yeah.
Because especially at that level, man, like when it starts getting to that like crazy end of the world style feeling.
Yeah. Which it
goes back to that selfish behavior. Yeah, dude, I remember at the beginning of the pandemic, man, sitting on my back porch thinking like, this is it, man. Like, I'm going to be living here. Like, what am I,
Yeah.
It's scary, man. And I don't know, like,
and now we have,
I think,
Canadian, U.S. governments all coming out saying, we shot down UFOs. It's like,
on the flip side, like, let's say if I was just going to say, like, okay, let's just say for a second, if it wasn't this, well, it's going to be hard for you. But if it wasn't this sort of unified tactic, what else would it be? What could it be?
So I mean, I only see it as that. I mean, and I forgot to mention this, but this is something that I ran across something where somebody was sort of throwing out this idea, and I kind of think that there could be some validity to this. Is that the whole point of the Chinese balloon was to get everybody's eyes in the sky, and the fact that, oh, well, we're not going to shoot it down, we're just going to let it.
That's a good point.
Flow on over into the ocean because, and like I said before about the pilots, they're using I believe that okay, say it's one of our craft, or say it's a hologram, and then we see a pilot shoot it down. Well, if you have witnesses with their cell phones, they're going to post all that stuff to the internet, and that's only solidifying the case even more. You know what I mean? So it's the idea that like our president let a, and if you're correct, let a Chinese
this administration, there's no way this guy, like he's I mean, and the same would be true. Like, here's the thing too. Whoever was president, yes, they're the commander in chief. That's the important piece of that information.
Right.
They're in charge of the military. And so the military and whatever the infrastructure is, then we need to blame the administration because there's more than one. In other words, like, I don't like hanging the hat on one person. Yeah. It's everybody that's working all those different jobs.
Yes.
Like, but there's even if it is, let's just say for just a second, again, going back to this isn't Project Bluebeam. Beam. And by the way, dude, I'm pretty sure I know I'm sorry. This is a sidetrack here, but I'm pretty sure there's a butter in Indonesia called Bluebeam.
Oh, no. There's a bread company called Sunbeam.
No. God, you think we got that in Indonesia, pal? No. It was called Bluebeam. It was actually pretty good. Okay, cool. Going back into it here. If it wasn't this, it's still bad enough, dude, that like, let's just say it was a spy scenario. Let's just say these other things are, and the reason why there's more of them is because now we've recalibrated our
NORAD
radar. And now, because like, I do remember, dude, when I was in this like helicopter in Seattle, like the air traffic control, I could hear like, you put on the you put on the headphones and stuff so you can hear in the I guess the cockpit of the helicopter. And you also hear what the air traffic person is saying, and they're like, we've got a drone that's flying at about 7,000 feet, so make sure your altitude. And we're like around that height because we're like, checking the city out. And I kind of like looked over to the pilot, and I'm like, I mean, is that okay? He's like, yeah, man, we're fine.
Are we cool?
Okay. So like, I imagine there's, especially now that drones are publicly available. Like I said, I fly one. There's a thing on there that it says, make sure you don't fly in restricted airspace.
Right.
And like most people just like skip out of it, like XX out of that,
Yeah, but that is the difference. All of the, quote unquote UFOs were like supposedly all like at least the size of like a car.
Yeah, no, I get it. But
I'm not saying that like,
maybe they're used to seeing a bunch of sky whales flying around, dude, and they...
I mean, could be.
Oh, I don't know, man. Long story short, I don't know what to think about it. I tend to lean... I'll say this. Do I think it's possible for there to be and always have been nefarious organizations that exist that are only interested in their own sort of self-interests and stuff that have ties to political leaders across the globe and
100%
fund a bunch of all this kind of stuff? Absolutely.
Yeah.
Do I, I don't know. I'll just say I hope it doesn't come true, at least for another couple hundred years, because I don't want to have to explain to my kids like who Voltron is and like why I like, the Transformers better. And you know what I'm saying?
I think the reason that I really wanted to do this episode is, number one...
So you could finally talk about every conspiracy theory.
No, but...
you always fill my head with.
I did realize in even just laying it out that, like, it does suck because I wish there was a way that I could just, like, take what's in my head and be like, here it is. Here's why all these strings, like, attach to each other. You know what I mean? And that's sort of, I will say that is probably one of the most frustrating things, I mean, especially for me with the rambling, but like for other sort of like, your neighborhood conspiracy theorists, because it's like there is a history, like if you're following like history, like a lot of the stuff has happened. A lot of the shadiness that's happened. So they're going off and I'm going off of like, the last 100 years of sort of behavior with these agencies. So it only makes sense that it's just another tactic. Whereas like somebody who you know, your regular 9-to-5 guy. He comes on, turns on the news at 11 o'clock before bed, and like that's all he's seeing. That's why I wanted to do this podcast, to basically
provide a different angle.
Well, but also for all that with all the UFO stuff, and you know, I'm sure you guys are like seeing like tons of stuff on social media, and I'm sure a ton of you are seeing the phrase Project Bluebeam and probably have no idea what it was. So that was like the real goal of mine, is like, hey, I kind of want to lay out, because it is, like I said before, it's extremely hard to find like a cohesive kind of layout of like what it all sort of encompasses, you know, and also give me the opportunity to ramble for 2 hours.
Yeah, I mean, I think it is fascinating. I know, you know, my brother's listening. You know, old friends.
Oh, we lost him an hour.
Yeah. When he read the words Project Bluebeam, he was gone. But no, I mean, like, it is. I understand both sides of the coin here, which is, you know, just as an example, and I was like, well, just pretend that it's not Project Bluebeam. What else could it be? And you're like, well, I mean, that's all I could. Once you kind of see and kind of have your own thoughts about something, sometimes it is kind of hard to see.
Once you take that red pill,
else, right?
It's hard to get that.
Yeah. It's just, it is fascinating, man. And I'm kind of, like I said, I just hope, like, can we just have like, hey, you know, I said this like, you know, in our first season and even I think last season, can we just have a couple of years where it's just like chill, man, please. I just want to be like a dad and show my kids Terminator 2 and not have to worry about, are they real? Are they not real? There's something in the sky. You know, like, can we just chill? Everybody can kind of keep their own religions and everybody can kind of keep their own governments. Let's just, hey, man, let's just chill.
Yeah.
Okay? Everybody just chill.
We don't need Voltron. No, one thing I do think that, you know, this is also our way of saluting Serge Monast, because whether you like him or hate him, he's a cool figure that would have been around like during like, you know, like around the time, probably before like X-Files, but like he just reminds me of like that kind of character, you know? So like, you know, and it's that like pre-internet kind of thing. Like I love that already. I mean, we love that already.
I mean, say what you will, but when I think of 1994, I think of Oasis, definitely maybe.
Hey, did you see that thing that I sent you?
Show. Huh?
Did you see that where like the artist that like wrote it is like selling like basically
artist that wrote it.
Yeah, so on the cover of Definitely Maybe, it's like that cursive, like
the font. Okay,
yeah,
that's cool.
The actual guy that physically wrote that with a nib dipped in ink. He's releasing these prints that he's writing it, and they're all numbered, and it says Definitely Maybe.
Oh man,
yeah, dude,
it's cool.
It's pretty awesome. No, but you know, I think there has to be something, even if you don't believe in anything that we just said. I think it's hard to deny the fact that he was a wanted man for like this arbitrary, bizarre, like being a part of a network of bad information. He had both of his kids taken away. And then, you know, he was jailed and arrested several times. And then the day after he was detained, or the day after the night he was detained, then he just has a mysterious like heart attack. So I think even if all that was just like coincidence, like, you know what I mean? Like it's, I feel like there's got to be something there, you know?
Yeah.
So here's to you, Serge Monast.
Cheers.
So if you would like to reach out to us or, you know, take a look at our manifesto, it's over on the Rabbit Trail on our Patreon. So if 2 hours isn't enough rambling for you, we're also doing it over there. And it's a little looser. It's a little
deeper too.
A little deeper. We so appreciate it, and we're so grateful for our best friends over there. It really means a lot. It's sort of a physical kind of way that you know you're able to show that you like appreciate what we're doing, and that's awesome to us. Go over and find us on Instagram, on social media. Shoot us a DM, drop us a comment. if you would like to talk to us or, tell a story or whatever, shoot it over to thatwouldberadpod@gmail.com. But even better than that, if you do have an urban legend, if you do have your own conspiracy theory that maybe I've never heard about, which I find that very hard to believe, feel free to send it over or leave a voice leave a voice memo on our website, thatwouldberadpodcast.com. And yeah, we would really love it. Get out there, tell one friend about the show. Get out there, leave a 5-star review if you have a minute in your busy day. And I guess that's about it. You got anything else, Woody?
I think that's it, other than just be careful out there. And if Voltron shows up this week,
yeah,
you know what to think.
Also, look out for that heart attack gun. We love you. We appreciate you. And as always,
be rad.
That's the way it goes. Clouds in a time where I just needed some sunshine. You were already dead before you became a ghost. You always said our future would be